So, welcome everyone to this meeting of Cheltenham Borough Council's Cabinet. I am Councillor Rowena Hay, I'm leader of the council. We don't have any members of the public present, but we may have some watching the live stream of the meeting on the council's YouTube channel, and the recordings of which will be held for 4 years. We do have, just so that everybody is aware, a refresher and the fact that we do have the CCTV and audio recording is in operation in the foyers and the public gallery, with recordings held for 5 months. We're not expecting a fire alarm, so if one does sound, go to the little green man on the wall, please, and the nearest one to you. I have apologies today. Councillor Lewis clearly is here, so that is not an apology. And we have an apology from Councillor Clucas and from Councillor Atherstone tonight. Can I see any member have any declarations of interests to declare? No, thank you. The minutes of the last meeting that was held at the end on the 24th of February will be considered at our next meeting. We don't have any public or member questions or petitions today. There's nothing being referred from Council, Overview and Scrutiny or any other committee to Cabinet. So therefore that leads us on to the reports from Cabinet members and tonight. So agenda item 5 is the report of the Cabinet Member for Housing and Customer Services, which is Councillor Clucas, but she is not in attendance tonight, so I will read out her an introduction to this report on her behalf. I have to say that if there are any detailed questions, then please do ask them, but I will have to come back to you at the end of it potentially. So Home Seeker Plus is the partnership between all 6 local authorities and West Oxfordshire. It's the system that advertises affordable rented homes from local housing providers, and it's how we assess who qualifies and how people are prioritised for housing. The last full review was in 2020, so it's time to update that policy so it reflects the current needs and the change in legislation and good practice. So a number of key changes are being proposed. First, we want to look again at who qualifies to join the housing register. At the moment, applicants who can reasonably afford to buy a suitable home don't qualify. The proposal is to extend this so that applicants who can reasonably afford to rent privately also wouldn't qualify. So the purpose is to make sure social housing is targeted to those who genuinely cannot resolve their own housing situation themselves. Secondly, we're proposing a clearer approach to situations where someone has deliberately worsened their own circumstances, for example, giving up suitable accommodation without good reason. Under the proposal, these applicants would be placed in the lowest priority band for 6 months and only move up if they can show they've taken reasonable steps to improve their situation. Thirdly, we want to introduce a requirement that applicants act on reasonable professional advice before being awarded higher priority. That might include working with a landlord on repairs or considering adaptations to stay safely in their home. If someone chooses not to follow reasonable advice, they may not be given that higher priority. We're also reviewing the role of employment in establishing a local connection. Currently, anyone on the application can use their employment to qualify. The proposal is that only the main or joint applicant's employment would count, except in exceptional circumstances, and this will bring us into line with national guidance. All of these proposals are designed to help us prioritise the homes we have, ensuring that those who need them most will be able to get safe homes they need faster. We're also consulting on options for how members of the armed forces establish local connection across the whole partnership. The consultation will explore whether they should automatically have local connection across all districts, be able to opt in to multiple districts, or remain with the current single area approach. It's important that we get this right, and that's in order to help us support more of the most at-risk veterans in our town. All of these proposals have been developed with our Home Seeker Plus partners and local housing providers. These policies impact our tenants, and we don't make policy about them without them. We'll be running a public consultation so we can understand views across the community before any final decisions are made. So please do share your views, especially if you're likely to be impacted by any of the proposed changes, because we want to shape policy with our residents in mind. So I would say when we go out to consultation, please do, tenants, residents, have your say. I'm happy to take any questions that members are asking, may want to ask. Any member? Councillor Jeffries? So,
It's not a question, it's a statement. Is that okay, Leader? I'm always supportive of the Home Seekers approach. I can remember back in the day, I had a brief portfolio myself. I'm always amazed at how we work collaboratively on these issues, clearly within the confines of the legislation, but also in terms of trying to manage demand. And that's what we're doing, obviously, here, with all these subtle changes we're going to go out to consultation on. It's about obviously looking at how it fits today. So I'm very supportive of the report, and it's very easy to read. And you've mentioned some of the highlights of that report, which I thought was interesting as well. I just always get frustrated when it comes to housing and homelessness. As you know, Leader, it's a bit of a hobby horse of mine, so I'm going to get on my soapbox for a minute and just shout that the government solved homelessness when we had a pandemic. They should solve it again. They've got it within their power to do it. We are effectively, with this policy and our approach, managing demand. We're doing it really effectively with partners across the areas as you described. But I really do wish that the hollow words that come out from central government actually did something of meaning, and they could solve homelessness if they really wanted to. But I'm really supportive of the policy and the document going out for consultation, Leader. Thank you.
Councillor Pinniger.
As you know, thank you, Leader. As you know, I've always had a particular interest in housing, and recently had casework around Home Seeker Plus allocations. So it's good to see this review of policy and the consultation. I'm glad that's coming forward. The particular casework, though, was centred around a sense of injustice when an emergency applicant received a property for someone who was expecting it because of disability. But that doesn't mean the process didn't work. It worked perfectly. This is just an opportunity for those people to now communicate their expectations, and I'll definitely be getting them involved in the consultation.
Any other member? I think before I go to the recommendations, I'd just like to make a comment, really, is to say that actually it just goes to show how right we've got it in terms of building more houses and having more houses and having more places for people to live. And whilst that, in some respects, I guess if you read that and looked at, you know, there are some criticisms that I'm sure might come out of that consultation, in all honesty, because you know, what we consider as affordable to be able, or enough money to buy, doesn't mean to say that people actually really can, because they might have some savings, but they possibly haven't got an income. So, you know, I'm very supportive of the principle behind this, but I'm also keen that actually when it comes to it, is that we've got a guidance, it's a policy, it's a document, it's not law, and that actually, you know, people's circumstances can also fit into that equation of whether or not they have a right to a home. But sure, that was just really quite a personal comment from me on that. But I just think it's an awareness of how some people might perceive that. But that said, it's the right thing to do, to have a policy, because we need some guidelines and some proper ones, and we're also fitting with national guidance, so, and best practice. So all of that is the right thing to do. So on that note, could I ask for a show of hands for support of this agenda item? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. Thank you, Martin. So the next report tonight is the Equality, Diversity and Inclusion Policy, which is a report by myself. We all know how important equality, diversity and inclusion is. And having just come through the other side of, sort of the whole International Women's Day, this sort of resonates for me a little bit today in terms of how important it is. So I'm introducing Cheltenham Borough Council's new Equality, Diversity and Inclusion Policy for this year. This is an important step in strengthening the kind of town we want to be, fair, welcoming and inclusive to everyone who lives, works or spends time here. As a council, we interact with thousands of people every year, residents, tenants, visitors, businesses and our own staff. And Cheltenham is a diverse and changing place. And we want to make sure that our services, decisions and our workplaces reflect that. This updated policy helps us to do exactly that. So what is the policy about? At its heart, it's a clear statement of our commitment to fairness, respect and equal access to opportunities. It sets out how we will meet our legal duties under the Equality Act and the Public Sector Equality Duty. But importantly, it goes further than the minimum that we're required to do. For example, we are voluntarily adopting what's known as the socio-economic duty. In simple terms, what that means is we're paying closer attention to how issues like low income affect people's ability to use services, access housing or take part in their community. And we know that these factors can create real barriers and we want to address them. This policy also lays out how we'll embed equality and inclusion across everything we do, from how we design services to how we collect and use data to how we engage with communities and how we support our staff. It reinforces our expectation that everyone interacting with the council, whether as a resident, tenant, employee or partner, should be treated with dignity and respect and feel able to be themselves without fear of discrimination or harassment. And we've also introduced a number of practical measures to help this happen. These include clearer responsibilities for each service area, an annual action plan, stronger training for staff and councillors, and an improved approach to equality impact assessments so that potential impacts are properly considered when decisions are made. It needs to be said that this policy was not developed in isolation. It builds on feedback from staff, from councillors, from our tenants, from our community groups, from complaints and customer insights, and our own service leads. It forms part of our ambition to be not just a compliant organisation, but a proactive and compassionate one that listens, learns and adapts. And approving this policy gives us a clear and modern framework to support that ambition. It's not the end of the journey, it's a foundation. And the real progress will come through the actions that we take, the conversations we have and the choices we make every day as a council. So thank you, everyone, for listening to that. It's something that feels really close to my heart, so I'm quite passionate about it. But I'm very happy to take any questions that members might have. Councillor Pinniger, or questions or comments, I should say.
It's a bit of both, yes. I'm equally passionate about this and feel it's very important. We're all living with difference, with friends, relatives, families, and many of us are just perhaps one accident away from a few years of disability. I mean, it can happen to anyone at any time. I also note there's a really useful glossary of terms at the back. It's very good. So my question then is, do you feel that this policy saves public money? Because I, for one, am certain that it does.
I think my answer to that question is that I'm not sure that in real financial terms, it saves money. But what it does, so from a cash perspective, I'm not sure that it does save money. But from if you implement the policy as it's laid out, then what that does is it potentially saves people needing to access more advice. So which does cost. Not that we don't have a budget for it, so it's not additional cost, but this is about prevention, not cure, isn't it? Really. So yeah, prevention is always better than cure. That would be so directly financially. I think it has the potential. Let's put it that way. It has the potential to save money, but that isn't what the policy is about. Is there any other member? So could I see a show of hands, please, to confirm the recommendations as they're set out? Thank you very much. That's unanimous. So the next report is the Housing Payments Crisis and Resilience Fund Policy, which is a report of Councillor Jeffreys.
Thank you, Leader. Colleagues, this council has administered discretionary housing payments to provide additional financial support to residents with housing costs for many, many years now. The scheme is now ending and it'll be replaced by the housing payments, the housing payments plan will be replaced within the new Crisis and Resilience Fund. I'm sure you can read about that as it's laid out in the report. Now, the housing payments work in exactly the same way as the old discretionary housing payments, but the new policy is needed so we can reflect the name change, ironically. We've also taken the opportunity to update the policy in a couple of areas. Again, that's referenced in the report, but I'm happy to take any questions on that. Now, this new fund, we will only have responsibility for administering it with new housing payments for the next 2 years, because they'll be fully integrated into the Crisis Resilience Fund, and then again it'll be administered by either the County Council or the new unitary authority, whichever comes first. So the government provides funding for the housing payments, and we'll receive that over the next 2 years, and the funding for next year has been confirmed at £106,443, which is the same for this year. Now, I think it's worth noting that this scheme provides this extra financial support to residents in need. Up until the end of February, I think 140 awards have been made, with over £80,000 so far. Now, there's clearly a number of applications which will still be assessed as we move forward. I'm happy to take any questions on this, Leader, if there are any. Thank you.
Does any member have any questions for Councillor Jeffreys on this report? No? I mean, it's really just a comment for me. It's really important that we move with the times. And that's what this is designed to do. That's the only comment I'd make on that. But can I see a show of hands for the to pass the recommendations as they're set out? That's a unanimous support for that. The next report is also the report of Councillor Jeffreys, and it's the discretionary business rate rent relief policy. Get your tongue around that, Rowena.
Thank you, Leader. Colleagues may remember the government announcements when it comes to their review of business rates. This report recommends that our discretionary business rates relief policy is updated to include 3 of the new government funded reliefs from April. As these reliefs are temporary legislation, it's being updated, and we're being asked to award these reliefs using our discretionary powers. It's in the annex to the policy in Appendix 4, you'll note. So it's specifically for this type of temporary scheme, and only this part of the policy has been updated. Some of the new reliefs are the supporting small business relief. The relief will help phase increases in bills over a 3-year period where businesses lost small business rates relief or retail hospitality leisure relief due to the 2026 revaluation. I think for 26-27, the business rates bills are being issued now, and 700 businesses will receive that relief, equivalent to about £2.6 million of support. There's also pubs and live music venue relief. This relief was announced in January as an extra support for pubs, which were facing large increases in bills as a result of the revaluation. This relief is only for 1 year and will reduce bills by a further 15% after any other reliefs have been applied. Just over £200,000 have been awarded so far to 71 pubs or venues across the town, are those that have been identified as eligible for the relief. There are other reliefs which I found kind of interesting. There's a relief for electric vehicle charging points and electric vehicle only forecourts. This was announced in the autumn budget. There are currently no business rates assessments in Cheltenham, but in case anybody is eligible for that, then they can obviously receive that relief. Clearly, there's obviously been quite a lot of movement when it comes to a lot of work for the officers in the Revenue Benefits team when it comes to these business rates changes and these relief changes. So I'd like to put on record my thanks for the hard work behind the scenes this service does in support of our town. I'm happy to take any questions, but I commend the report to you, Leader. Thank you.
Has any member got any questions? Councillor Baker. I should say comments as well.
Yeah. I mean, we've all read and no doubt spoken to people who are really, really struggling, particularly small businesses at the moment, particularly those in the hospitality sector with the increase in minimum wage, with the increase in national insurance and so on and so on and so on. My question, I mean, it's great to see that 700 businesses have been identified as being eligible. It's great that about 80 pubs as well. Can I just ask, is it up to us to identify these businesses, or are the businesses expected to apply to us? And could it be the case that there are businesses out there which qualify, which don't realise that they qualify?
Well, that's a very specific and technical question. I could sit on the fence and say, actually, I think it's a combination of both of those. Some businesses will undoubtedly know they're entitled to this or be aware of that, and then they'll approach the council. I'm not quite sure how proactive the team are, but I know they do try to be where possible. So it's a combination of both, really, to be fair. Undoubtedly, there's going to be some that may or may not get missed. Hopefully not, because the team do work really, really hard to support our local businesses. I can double check for you and get back to you outside the meeting, Councillor Baker, but I'm pretty sure it's a mixture of both those scenarios.
Councillor Baker.
I just think it's an opportunity that really mustn't be missed. So I think if we can do some comms on it, if we can perhaps work with the Chamber of Commerce and the BID, just to make sure that this is really generally known by the whole of the business sector. Thank you.
Undoubtedly, I'll check with the team. I think if colleagues can cast their mind back when the government did the business rates reset, I think there was quite a lot of publicity nationally about pubs closing, for instance, and about the support that wasn't going to be there for small businesses. So I think nationally there was a huge outcry, but I will double check with the team as to what that need might be, and if there is that need for a bit of proactive comms, we can have that conversation. But clearly, if there's a need for it. Thank you, Leader.
Councillor Telford.
Thank you, Leader. I think business rates, other than maybe exorbitant rent increases from landlords that may not be in the country, or maybe pension funds, or all of those sorts of things, I think business rates is probably the single most damaging thing to businesses trying to survive in this economy. They're massive and unsustainable for a lot of small businesses, let alone, as we're seeing, national businesses that just cannot handle it. And these reliefs seem like the government trying to fix their own mistakes somewhat, but again, it's not really going far enough in support. So while I obviously completely support this, because we need support for hospitality, we need pubs and stuff to survive, because they're part of being British is a pub at the end of the day. The government needs to go much further than this. They need to make much bigger changes. An example being, why are listed buildings exempt from empty business rates? Like normal buildings, I think it's 3 months you get if you're empty, that you're exempt from business rates. Listed buildings are just indefinitely they can apply to be. And that's ridiculous, because it discourages people from investing in their building or reletting it to a new business. And they can just sit there on the hands as a pension fund or whatever and say, oh, it doesn't really matter, actually. We've got an asset that's increasing in value over time. We don't really need to let it out, which is terrible for high streets and terrible for businesses. It doesn't actually encourage anything. Why, for example, why can't we set rates locally to tailor streets and things like that, where we go, oh, there might be higher vacancy rates on this road? It would be so helpful if local councils could look at it and go, we could probably give some extra relief to this one, to this one, to this one, but the government would have to let us do that. And I think it's on them to do it, because I think there's so many opportunities there where you can help businesses grow if you can adjust rates based on a street or based on the type of businesses you need in an area to support, a thriving circular economy, and not just all one type of business or all types of another. And that would solve higher vacancy rates. We do very well on vacancy rates, but not everywhere does, and we need the support. So I think the government needs to go a hell of a lot further than this. But I do welcome it, and I'm sure a lot of our pubs and other similar businesses in the town will welcome this relief as something to keep them alive. Thank you.
Any other member? Councillor Pinniger.
Thank you, Councillor Tailforth. That really puts it all in perspective. I hadn't been seeing it in that way. These are just sort of very narrow slices of relief, very specific. And in particular, the thing that's been bothering me over the last couple of weeks is the lack of a relief in here for not-for-profit businesses like community centres. And I think I'll be looking into that further over the coming weeks.
Thank you, everyone. If there's no more comments, I think, you know, a lot's been said, and we're pretty powerless, really, to do anything. I mean, you know, it's a huge relief that, as an example, that the Business Improvement District Board made the decision to actually raise the threshold of the cap that there was on businesses to a much higher amount. So a lot, about 700, well, I think it's that, I might have, don't quote me on the number, but there are a significant number of businesses that have therefore not got to contribute to the Business Improvement District. Now, some might see that as a bad thing because the bid does a lot. But on the other hand, it is, you know, the business is playing their part in order to help maintain and sustain those SME businesses, which is what many of them are. So I think there's another thing, isn't there, with the government is they've gone off. It's like we'll go this far, but we're not gonna go all the way, and it ends up by impacting on so many organisations in such a negative way. I think an example I'd use of all of that would be, you know, that football clubs or sports pitches, there seems to have been a sort of blanket idea that every single sports pitch must therefore have a bar, and therefore their commercial business rates, which is like most of them are just a playing field, a sports pitch with a changing room and no more. And it's so, you know, we're putting yet again so many of our voluntary, because most of those organisations are run by volunteers, and we're making them have to jump through hoops to question, and you know, many of those are run by parents who work and have families. It's not what they need to be doing is fighting a half-baked piece of government legislation. I'll get off my soapbox. Could I see a sign of support for this? Thank you, that's unanimous. Our next report tonight is agenda item 8, which is the discretion, oh no, sorry, let me move on. That's the biodiversity report, and it's the report of Councillor Collins.
Yes, thank you, Leader. You'll notice that I'm not in my usual seat, but I can move on from that. Once again, it is my pleasure to present this report to Cabinet. As usual, this report contains a huge amount of fascinating information. So the first thing I would like to do is to thank the officer team for putting it all together. Therefore, I do feel a little bit guilty in a way, because as the relevant Cabinet member, it is I that gets to simply have the job of just reporting this and presenting it to everyone else this evening. We probably know a lot more about biodiversity than most of us would think. And so we should as elected members, because I see that as being part of our role, to be honest with you. I hope that you've all had time to read and understand the report. As we don't have any officer support tonight, so nobody can answer any difficult questions. But if anyone does have any questions regarding the report itself, I will make sure that you get an answer to any questions, because that is the way this works. I will point out this evening that I'm just presenting the report. So It's not something that we can debate or that we can ask to be changed, other than the minor changes that is one of the recommendations. Although you are, of course, welcome to make positive comments and observations about the report. So, what is it and why are we doing it? Well, we are required to adopt the Cheltenham Borough Council's biodiversity report for the period of 2026 to 2031, thus fulfilling and strengthening our statutory biodiversity duty under the Environment Act of 2021. It's a bit of a mouthful, but I think I managed to get through it. The report sets out the borough's key habitats, species, designated sites and green infrastructure. It also summarises the actions undertaken across planning, land management and community programmes, as well as outlining the progress made since the Council's first consideration of complying with this duty. It fits in and gives us a clear ecological baseline and sets out our future priorities that are contained in the Gloucestershire Local Nature Recovery Strategy, as well as the Cheltenham, Gloucester and Tewkesbury Strategic and Local Plan, or SLP as we come to know it. As the relevant local authority, it is our statutory duty to publish this report for the period of 2026 to 2031. This report will be reviewed towards the end of that period, and any changes in requirements or legislation will be included in a new report that will be updated and published sometime in 2031. This evening, we as Cabinet are asked to agree to the following recommendations: that Cabinet agrees that the Biodiversity Report 2026 to 2031 be adopted, and the standard one, that Cabinet delegates authority to the Director of Planning and Building Control, in consultation with myself as the Cabinet Member for Planning and Building Control, to make any necessary minor amendments, corrections or additions to this document prior to it being formally published. I do hope that you all feel able that you can support these recommendations. Thanks very much.
So any member wish to comment or ask a question? Councillor Baker.
Thank you. This is an excellent report. I think, for me, what's good about it is that I think all governments, local, national, are passing motions and introducing policies all the time. But how often do you actually have an opportunity to review the actual delivery of that policy? And the thing about this report is we have to do every 5 years. It gives a really good account of what we've actually done over that 5-year period and how we have actually really seriously considered and delivered on the policies. And I often mention friends groups in this chamber, as you know, and a lot of this couldn't have been delivered without the close relationship the Green Space team have with all the different friends groups across the town. We have 2 local nature reserves in Cheltenham, the Pilley Bridge Nature Reserve, a form of railway cutting. And it's often railway cuttings and things like that which provide a fantastic natural habitat. We have the Griffiths Avenue Local Nature Reserve. And of course, we're soon going to have a National Nature Reserve at Leckhampton Hill. So I think Cheltenham can be really, really proud as an urban centre how much we do to deliver biodiversity across the town, both in terms of what we do for changing our planting regimes, going away from bedding plants to perennials, for example, planting lots of trees, but also how we're delivered in terms of planning, making sure that we're getting that biodiversity net gain on planning applications. So I think it's a great report. I think it's a great endorsement of this council, of all our staff and officers and the councillors here, and all of the local groups which help us to deliver this policy. Just one point of accuracy here. It mentions the Friends of Leckhampton Hill and folk in Cheltenham King's Common, that I'm a member of that. When I became the Cabinet member, I had to come off that particular committee, so that can be corrected in the report. But great report, thank you.
Councillor Pinniger.
I just wanted, remind myself and remind other people that this is really a summary. Each of the paragraphs in there has got so much behind it. It's not, it feels too short. It feels short, but when you read each item, if you've been with the council for a while, you know there is so much behind each of those items. And then when I look at it, when I look at the references, I note that we've been working on this since 2006. So all of those reports referenced here have built up such a tailwind, that we're now able to do these future actions, and we're just in such a good place. So thank you for the report. Thank you.
Councillor Telford.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow on that, because I think if you do look towards that table at the end of the report, it's an almost endless list of actions and progress as councillors and this administration has made over the past 20 years. And I think, you know, despite what some political leaflets might state, it's clear that we care about the environment and biodiversity in Cheltenham quite deeply. And we've made that, you know, a point of all of these different policies and all of these different actions we've taken and our corporate plan. And we continue to do that. You know, our green spaces are a prime example, the way we manage something like Hampton Hill, which is such an amazing resource, but then how we then use wildflower plantings from the hill in our parks and gardens to make little wildflower meadows to help have bee corridors and all sorts of things like that. I think those are incredible things that a lot of places just don't do. And for such a densely populated urban area, we've got so much biodiversity. And I think that's just, and it should be really commended for all the work that the officers have done on that and the volunteers have done on that, and also this administration has bothered to do. I think that's really important. I did notice one thing that might be worth in the amendments, obviously. The Cheltenham tree strategy that was approved the other day obviously isn't included in that list of things. We've got the Gloucestershire one, but not the Cheltenham one, so it might be worth included there as a reference. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. As usual, I'm taken aback by the positive responses from my cabinet colleagues, and this is no exception. This report, if I could just refer to Councillor Baker, yeah, of course I will get that amended to take your name off of that list for the Friends of Leckhampton Hill, but I'm on behalf of the Cabinet and the Council. I can make no apologies about all the achievements that have already been made by our officer groups, by our volunteer groups, by everyone who's associated with this council. It's absolutely great. And you know, you reminded me then of the little bee sanctuary that we've got next to the Honeybourne line in St Paul's, and this is things that you wouldn't imagine perhaps being done in urban centres like Cheltenham, because Cheltenham's got a population, as it says in the report, of 118,000. So it's not a small place, and there's an awful lot going on. And if we continue to work in a positive way with all of our partners, things can only get better. And yeah, I mean, I would say that 5 years' time, Cheltenham Borough Council probably won't exist anymore if we believe the government's timelines. But I do hope that this is one of the things that is taken on by the unitary authority that will replace Cheltenham Borough Council in the future, because it's so important, not just for us, but for the people that will come in the future. So thank you very much for that.
So any other member wish to comment? There was lots of positivity there. I think it's what our job now, just picking up on Councillor Collins' last point, what our job now is between now, and July, but so for 7 authorities going down into 1 or 2 is our job to make sure now that we leave our town in the best possible way that we can in the next 2 years, while we as local members actually exist. As I say, 7 councils down into 1 or 2, yet to be decided by the government. But let's, absolutely, this is part of the day job of still delivering for our residents. So can I see a show of hands, please, to support this? Thank you very much. That's unanimous. Our next report, in fact, it's our final report of the night, is the notification of decisions that made by the Community Infrastructure Levy. This is by the Joint Strategic Committee. Decisions were made. So what in order for transparency and openness, I'm pleased tonight to share the grant decisions made by the Community Infrastructure Levy Joint Committee, because it was delegated, decision-making was delegated to them. I think it's important to point out as well, just for clarity, is that as part of that agreement, all three leaders of those, or voting members, have to agree on the decisions that we make there. So this isn't just Cheltenham, this is about Tewkesbury and Gloucester. But for transparency and openness, I'm reporting that here tonight. So we met earlier this year to allocate the new round of the still funding money that comes directly from developments in our area, and to reinvest it back into the key pieces of infrastructure and services that matter most to local residents. The latest round allocations include support for the really, really critical development, major improvement around the M5 on Junction 10 that, I have reported here and at full council of struggling to get this across the line, working in, good partnership, working with all of those districts, but also the county council. And in fact, all of the districts across Gloucestershire have got behind this because it's important for the Golden Valley development to really succeed. So it will, that grant will it's helping us to unlock homes and jobs and safer, more sustainable transport options for our future. And this investment will contribute to that essential enabling works, including the ecological and archaeological surveys that must be completed before construction. These improvements will benefit residents across Cheltenham, Gloucester and Tewkesbury, and support, as I said, the wider ambitions in the Golden Valley. So the local, and also supporting the local strategic infrastructure projects, which are made possible through the 25% portion of the fund that is ring-fenced for community-focused initiatives. And this supports the work of local organisations striving to improve neighbourhood facilities, enhance public spaces and promote healthier, more connected communities. It is important that still that 25% that we as local authorities, the three of us together, said that actually it's important that we don't just have the major infrastructure that is absolutely essential, but we look at joining up those communities, whether it be a footpath, but it still has to meet the strategic test in order to qualify for that. So these grants are more than numbers on a page, really, aren't they? They represent real change, delivered by committed partners working hard across our boroughs. And I'm incredibly proud to be supporting and part of that. And as always, the SIL process is transparent and accountable, and these decisions will be monitored. And more importantly, it will be fed back through our councils to ensure that every pound that is being spent is making the greatest possible impact to this. So it's not a decision for us to say you don't agree, because you delegated it to that committee and we've agreed. But I'm bringing it here for any comments that members might want to make, and for Cabinet to formally note. Any member want to make any comment? Councillor Collins.
Thank you, Leader. I know you said it's not for us to make any or to agree or disagree, because it's just a report that you're bringing to the Cabinet. But I just want to point out, as your reserve, if you like, on this, within this whole SIL process, I attend all the meetings anyway, so I listen to all of the debates, and I do occasionally get to vote on things when decisions are made at the committee. And I just want to put on record that I totally agree with the decisions that have been made by the committee. So thank you for that.
Thank you, members. So it's really only to note, but if I could just see a show of hands that says we've duly noted it. Thank you all. So that's the end of the formal reports tonight, and that leads me on to the briefing session for members. So if I start with Councillor Pinniger, do you have anything that you wish to brief Cabinet on?
Thank you, Leader. Yes, work continues to embed strong climate policy in the strategic and local plan, alongside progress on a town centre heat network, following the acceptance of 100k from Department of Energy, Sustainability and Net Zero to fund the next phase of detailed development. We're hoping we've had meetings with some geothermal companies, and we're hoping to coordinate the delivery of that with geothermal, although the geothermal at the moment remains a private opportunity, not a council one. We are introducing the DATE sustainability tool, which stands for the Donut Advisory Tool for Events, for all events on council land. And we're planning to extend that to market operators. And it's, we've also, yes, this is interesting, we've co-signed a national call for government to rethink the proposed limit on local energy efficiency standards for planning, because they did have the idea of putting something into the next issue of the NPPF, National Planning Policy Framework, that would prevent local councils from having higher energy efficiency standards. So we've objected to that with other local authorities as a group. The Transitional Regional Energy Strategic Plan has been published. This is a plan, an early insight into the future grid capacity needs of the South West. And that actually, interestingly, ties in with the heat network work and the geothermal, because if we can use geothermal to generate the heating, then that reduces the demand on the grid. There is some work at the Leisure Centre. We've started the independent decarbonisation survey, and we should get results from that soon. We've continued our engagement work. There was a net zero conference at the MX. There was an outdoor heat pump demonstration at Lidl, and we secured £14,000 from the Climate Leadership Gloucestershire for a local accreditation scheme for SMEs to reduce carbon emissions. Let's move on. And so housing retrofit continues. There's now 115 properties that have been upgraded to EPC C or above, with positive tenant feedback, and assessments have begun on the Warm Homes Social Housing Fund Wave 3 to do even more this time with heat pumps. So, oh, and the final thing, yes, early work's begun on a CBC-wide e-learning module and possible internal carbon dashboard, so that all members and leaders can have a good idea of what the climate emergency means and what we're doing about it. Thank you, Leader.
Busy. Thank you very much, Councillor Pinniger. Councillor Telford.
Thank you, Leader. I've got my feet back under the table now, post-paternity leave. Having a newborn does give you a moment to reflect on some of the best parts of living in Cheltenham, I think. And obviously, already mentioned them earlier, but I think a stroll through one of the parks is probably the easiest way to reset both us and the baby and feel human again. But I think our range of independent coffee shops are a fantastic trip out into the town centre, and you can kind of just go out and have a coffee and get out of the house. And personally, I cannot wait to take her to the Wilson, so when she can see a bit further from her face, so she can actually see the artwork on the wall. But since being back, I've met with Cheltenham Festivals last week and Cheltenham Trust this week to discuss some exciting developments with them and their plans for the future and how we can work better between us for our town and our culture. A positive update is that the community-run Tourist Information Centre, who were previously housed in Cav House, has now found a new home at the Town Hall. So that's obviously good for the Cheltenham Trust and the Town Hall, and it's good for them, and it's good for visitors to our town. So if anyone's watching online and wants to, and ever needs the Tourist Information Centre, at least they know where it is. And today I had a good meeting with Fran from Cheltenham Bid to discuss upcoming projects in our town centre and what work they're doing, what work we're doing to try and support businesses and to try and support our local economy. And also to raise some of the concerns residents have with some of the shop vacancies we've been seeing at the moment, which are driven mostly by things like the business rates I've already had a rant about, but also things, like rents and just all sorts of problems that a lot of them are nationwide businesses that are just really going under, a lot of them, like we've seen with Brewdog and in the brewery, which is a real shame because the brewery were at 100% capacity. So now they're going to have to fill that, but I'm sure that space will fill up really quickly. But the good news is with some of these is that while it's always a bit concerning when you see a few shops close next to each other, because it looks a lot worse. Even our vacancy rate is really low comparatively to the southwest and to the country. It always does look a lot worse when you get a few closed in a row. The circumstances are all mostly different, but they are, and they're not related, but they are what it is. But the good news is most of these shops have businesses lined up already to take them on, which I think is the important thing, because while they always look a bit sad when they're empty and you don't know what's going on, most of them are actually being taken on quite soon. So it shouldn't be long before a town centre is looking back at its best. And I think that's really important. So residents feel kind of reassured that it's not just going to be left with lots of empty shops, because that's not going to happen. But outside of that, the government really just need to get their act together on many things, and business rates being one of them. But last but not least, tomorrow I'm having a tour of the Everyman Education Centre to see the work they've been making there. So that's going to be really good. So I'll be able to give a next cabinet a nice little update about that. And I will also be attending the Cheltenham Arts Council Awards, which are in this building. So that's a nice, exciting thing for our culture and our arts. Thank you.
Councillor Jeffreys.
Thank you, Leader. I've got nothing specific to update. I think I need to, as an inward-facing service more than outward-facing service, work much harder to try and find a briefing for my colleagues next time round, because I'm rather envious of some of the antics my colleagues get up to on behalf of the town. I know that the teams work very hard, and I need to obviously double my efforts to get out there more, I suspect. Thank you, Leader.
Councillor Baker.
Well, leading on from that comment, obviously virtually all of my portfolio is public facing, and it does give me a great opportunity actually to get out and meet and see what's going on. So, and there is a lot going on. And I talked in the budget recently about the money that we had in the budget for allotments, and we have a absolutely brilliant new allotment officer in place, been with us now for about 6-7 months, and he really has hit the ground running. And we did have a waiting list for people wanting allotments of about 800, and we've got that down now to about 500. And that's through a combination of creating new plots on some of the allotments, which is great news, but also making sure that plots which are no longer being used, are not wanted, are being released and then made available to new people to come in. And in fact, I was down on Midwinter allotments today, and seeing some of the work that's been done down there, clearing out a whole load of rubbish which has accumulated over years to create some parking provisions and skip provisions for allotment holders to use to make their life as allotment holders even more pleasurable. And I am struck when I go down to allotments about the friendliness and the social side of allotments, you know, and the chatting with each other and a cup of tea and all that sorts of things. They're fantastic, and it's great that we're getting that waiting list down. I also wanted to just make reference to situation at the crematorium regarding the badgers. We've talked about this. It's an ongoing situation. It's a very, very difficult situation to try and deal with because we've got a very, very long established badger set down there. And we were previously looking at an idea of relocating the badger set and creating a new badger set, and fingers crossed the badgers will relocate to their new home. But that is not only incredibly disruptive and also incredibly expensive, it's also no guarantees. And badgers being badgers, and they're very, very difficult animals to say, you can move to your new home, you can't come back to your old home. So we've had working with the Gloucester Badger Group, we've had a second opinion now from an ecologist, and we're looking at a different option, which is to repair the worst area of damaged path and to put in some sunken fence along that, so that we can actually leave the badgers where they are, but control to an extent some of their movement. And I think that, combined with some clear signage, may well be a way of resolving the situation for everybody's benefit. But it is a very, very difficult and a very sensitive issue, as you can all imagine. And I've mentioned before about recycling. We are now ready to move with our recycling in Tetra Paks. That's going to start from the 1st of April. People will be able to put their Tetra Paks in with their cans and in with their plastic. So that's a real big bonus. And we're also now just gearing up to roll out the collection of flexible plastic packaging at the curbside. We're just looking at stock levels for the bags that we will be providing. So that's likely to start being rolled out in about June on a ward by ward basis. It already happens in parts of Ben Hall, Wyman's Brook. So we're gradually going to be moving that around to other parts of the town. That's probably all I want to refer to. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Baker. Councillor Collins?
Yeah, thank you, Leader. I always find it fascinating listening to our cabinet colleagues about what they've been up to and some of the things. And I think for me, Councillor Jeffries captured it. Inward looking, I would say planning and building control is inward looking, because I'm having to deal with neighbour disputes and with applicants who perhaps have misunderstood what Section 106 funding is, etc., and things like that. So it's not always a happy ending, let's say. But when Councillor Pinniger was talking about the proposed changes to the National Planning Policy Framework, I'm looking down at my screen because, of course, in my member updates, I'm going to talk very briefly about exactly what you said. And then, did I hear right? Did Councillor Telford say that parenthood is a walk in the park? But I think I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Councillor Lewis?
No updates from me, Leader, but I'm going to bring you something very exciting next month.
Thank you, Councillor Lewis. Well, I do lots of things, but not much of which will mean an awful lot to a lot of people, because actually the large part of my job, apart from the fact that sitting on the Strategic Local Partnership and making sure that we're covering developments, and we had a very big meeting, and of course we're due to go out to Reg 18 consultation very shortly, which is exciting but scary, because without a local development plan, we won't be able to stop developers building wherever they want, particularly given the government's build, which I don't disagree with, but actually let local areas decide where to build and how many are sustainable, because at the moment the government are just saying, you know, I mean, and for Cheltenham, we were within, we were 4.5 of being able to meet our 5-year housing supply. The government then changed the numbers that meant that we're now about 2. We've reduced because of the increase in number that we've been told we've got to build. And it's not that I'm against house building, because it's one of our top priorities, but it's the argument of who builds where and how it's built and the quality and the design and considering place. Because one of the things that, you know, I try to contribute to in those meetings is this is actually about homes. This isn't about a house for somebody to live in. It's about somebody's home and everything that, you know, we want and know within communities. So it's I met this week as well with the chair of the trust, of Cheltenham Trust, and with Councillor Telford, with the chief exec, which was, you know, an opportunity. I think we both saw it as is an opportunity to reset that partnership, because actually they do a heck of a lot, and they could do with shouting about how much more they do. So it's always nice to meet new people, but that's a very brief update from me for this week. So that's all of the decisions and the cabinet briefings. So, sorry, that's the cabinet briefings. All that's left is the decisions of cabinet members. So in February, so the first one, or the first two actually were Councillor Baker, decisions that Councillor Baker took.
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, both of these decisions relate to recycling, which is incredibly important to this borough. So the first one is to, we use a company called Plan B. They're a recyclable materials broker. So I used to be an insurance broker years ago. This is a broker who takes all our recycled material and finds a home for it and gets the best price for it. And they're doing a fantastic job. We're generating around £1 million a year from the sale of recyclables. And that is why it's such a significant operation that we do. And you consider how that, I'm probably going off brief a bit, but consider how that really offsets the cost of refuse collection. So that is a 2-year extension to that contract. And secondly, and quite related, we have purchased a fully automatic baling press, material stamper and conveyor belt. The current equipment is well past its sell-by date. The good thing about this equipment, is it'll be more than capable of taking on the new types of products that we're looking to recycle, such as Tetra Paks. And also, given the potential redevelopment of that whole operation, perhaps there or somewhere else, all the equipment can be lifted and shifted. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you. I should have said that actually, whilst the list that you might have in front of you says a lot of them, so it says listed out, there are actually only 5 decisions to be taken today. So the next set of decisions that were taken in March was by Councillor Collins.
Yeah, okay, thank you, Leader. I wasn't expecting you to come to me, but still, I made 2 decisions recently, and I think the first thing to say about them both is that they are collective partner decisions where we've worked with other authorities, whether it be Gloucestershire County Council and the other district councils. I think, in fact, in both cases, it was all 7 councils that worked together to respond to national government requirements. But the first one was the Gloucestershire Local Nature Recovery Strategy. And when it's written down as an LNRS, it sounds a bit like an old railway company to me. But still, this is, to confirm within our planning policy and within development management, and of course biodiversity, which we talked about earlier. That's all included in that, which I think is lovely, because looking ahead, we're not going to be working with these partner councils. We're going to be part of those partner councils. The other one, to approve the council submission of the combined Gloucestershire Local Planning Authority's response to the Strategic and Local Plan Authority's response to the National Planning Policy Framework consultation. And Councillor Pinnaker early on mentioned that, and there was loads of things in there, and you mentioned one of them, of course. I've always said that MPPF is the minimum standards that we and developers should be achieving, not the maximum. And one day I just hope that I wake up in the morning and that's happened, because it hasn't yet. But that was all I'd like to say. Thank you, Leader.
And the final decision taken was a decision taken by Councillor Jeffreys.
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, I took the decision, colleagues, to approve the sale of a plot of land known as 45 Springmount Way, and to authorise the Director of Housing, Communities and Governments, in consultation with the Director of Law and Legal, to undertake the necessary paperwork. Now, I should really wax lyrical for a good 5 minutes in an animated fashion to make it really enthralling and inciting like my colleagues have done. But it's a very, very functional decision I took, Leader. Thank you.
So with that in mind, it's now 2 minutes or so past. In fact, it's 7:04, and I'll officially close the meeting because there's nothing else that we need to discuss tonight. So thank you, everybody, for your